Hey, Kyler here. Our aim for this show is to leverage every opportunity that life throws at us. I hope you find value in today's show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leverage Life Show. We've got a new episode for you on this topic. Buy term and invest the rest. Good advice or bad advice? First, gut, shoot from the hip response. It depends. And I know that may not be what you want to hear in the way we want to frame it, but this is how we're going to frame for today's episode. What problem is being solved? Buying term and investing the rest, it is great advice depending on your situation. And I know for Kyler and I, we have heard this so many times, countless times from our advisor friends, our CPA friends, those who are even building wealth and they know they need term because it replaces their income in their young kid phase. And when their kids are growing up, like if they get taken out, they need that term policy that, yes, it's going to expire at a certain day, but they need it to really replace their income so it buys their family time. That's the problem that it's solving. It's replacing their income. But does that always work for a higher estate, for an estate that's worth 5 million, 10 million? Is buy term and invest the rest an actual really good solution for that family? And yes, to a certain extent, but once you start getting to that taxable estate exposure, it's not the best advice out there. And that's what we want to tackle today, because when we're talking about life insurance on the term and the permanent side, we want to get as creative and flexible as possible for our clientele and actually customize something that works for their portfolio. So before we jump into this whole episode today, let me remind you of that frame and that question. What problem are you trying to solve with life insurance? Life insurance not attached to a problem is not a good solution. So what problem are we actually trying to solve? Because the answer to that changes every single part of the structure in someone's estate.
That's so rock solid, because when we look at the different people that we're working with, we have to figure out what problems they have. And that's just everybody. Like, you talk to a CPA, what problems do they have with their taxes? What problems does a financial advisor encounter with, their clients that they're sitting in front of? And so these are the right questions to be asking, and they're completely different answers, of course. And this is something that we've been talking about, for a while now. And I knew that we wanted to, make a show on this specifically, but like we said, they're two great answers to two specific problems. And it's not a universal answer across the board to just get term and then invest the rest. And so obviously with the clientele that we're typically working with high net worth individuals, that advice was probably good for them at younger ages, like in their 30s and stuff. But now that they have amassed a certain amount of wealth, like it's just not going to be the correct solution depending on their situation. Okay. And so let's dive into really the specifics, right? I feel like we've kind of talked about this in the past, but when it comes to term, that is for your temporary window of exposure, if you will, right? We've got someone that's in their 30s. They're probably, married. They've got a family, got some kids now. They've got a mortgage. And they've got to have something in place. So if that primary breadwinner does pass away, the family is not going to be just financially sunk. That is what term insurance is for. And I think the advice of buy term, invest the rest is great for that situation. But we also have to think of the second part of that statement, invest the rest. Okay.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of people aren't actually doing that. So it's going to bite them anyways, because, you're going to buy term insurance, but they're going to use that money to use it for something else a lot of times. So, you've got to be able to be smart about this in general to make sure that you're actually doing the investing as the second part, if you're going to be doing the option of buying term. So, well, let's talk about the other aspect, of course, which is going to be permanent insurance. And so when we're talking about permanent insurance, we've talked about this before. It's pretty obvious what that is. It is life insurance that's permanent. Let's not overcomplicate that. There's a lot of different types of permanent insurance in place, obviously, but when we're talking about solving the problem for like liquidity for our clients, we're looking at a kind of a higher tiered permanent type of solution, right? So there are, of course, just permanent solutions for your everyday permanent policy, right? Like you can get whole life policies, just different IULs, universal life policies. But when we're looking at permanent life insurance, we're looking for that to solve a very specific problem. And for our clientele, that's going to be a liquidity at death problem. So somebody that has amassed a pretty good net worth, usually it's going to be, that will do this stuff for premium finance in general. It's going to be something that's at least 5 million, 10 million net worth. But for someone sitting even more like the 15 million plus net worth, this is where we really need to be talking about the liquidity stuff, because that's when we're starting to get into situations where they are taxable. And so taxable meaning that they are going to have an estate tax problem specifically. And as of right now, we've talked about this before, I think the last episode, individually, that threshold is 15 million net worth. For married couples, it's 30 million. There's a lot of people that don't fall into that category, of course, but we've talked about this before. Laws can change, and that can make or that can expose a lot of other people into, having a taxable estate if those numbers drop in any way, shape, or form. And so people that have real estate, they have businesses that they own, they've got different partnerships that they're a part of. They have a lot of net worth things on paper, so they're worth a lot, but a lot of it's just illiquid. And
Mm.
so if somebody does have a taxable estate and they have a lot of illiquid assets, that can be problematic, because when that person passes away and they have a taxable situation, the IRS is going to come knocking and say, hey, we want our cut. What is the family going to do? They don't have the liquidity to actually pay estate taxes. That
Mhm.
is the problem that we're solving right here with premium finance. So what we're going to do is get large amounts of life insurance to make sure that upon death, that family has the liquid money to pay estate taxes. That is exactly what we're solving with this solution. And I want people to know that is exactly the problem that we're solving, because there are a lot of advisors out there that we've talked about that will just try to sell any policy to anybody and try to solve a problem that doesn't exist, right? It's like, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to lie to you. We're not going to steal your client. We're not going to try to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Okay. So liquidity is the main solution for what we are doing with high net worth clients that are taxable.
Let me even take it a step further, Kyler, with a very visceral moment that you can feel and put yourself into. And some of our listeners have actually been in this moment before, but think about it with me and put yourself in a pew at a church during a funeral service. A family who is wealthy, but a lot of those dollars are tied up in assets. They're one having to grieve the death of that primary breadwinner. And maybe they had to scramble to even get the funeral together because you have less than a week to put that on and make it honorable and make a memorial service for that family member. But also, too, think about what is going through that family's mind when they have 9 months to pay 5 to 10 million to the IRS. And there's not 5 to 10 million liquid in a checking account. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But where is that money usually tied up? In a farm, in a multifamily property, maybe in a Roth account that's accumulated a lot and has compounding interest. They have 9 months to get that thing sold. And all of those things are going to have consequences, tax consequences, maybe. Maybe the asset's going to have to be sold at a discount. Not even a maybe. It is going to be sold at a discount because these buyers, maybe they're a wholesaler. They know to look for those moments. And they are feeding on that emotional energy, waiting for that right opportune time to appeal to that pain point so they can solve that problem. Hey, we'll buy it for 60 cents on the dollar. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And we don't want that to be the feeling you have to experience as you're sitting at that funeral service trying to mourn the loss of a family member that you deeply love. And you're scrambling, wondering, how in the world are we going to pay all this stuff off? how in the world are we going to get this estate settled? And that's why it's so important to solve this problem on the front end. And that is a more permanent solution than what term insurance can provide. And just think about the end goal of term insurance. What does a term mean? It expires. And most people have a term in place when they're 25, 30, 35, say a 20 to 30-year term. That will expire once they hit 60, 65, 70. So it is going to expire and then you lose that death benefit coverage. But if you wait till you're 65 or 70 to put a premium finance case together, it's going to be really hard to get the numbers green when they need to get green. It's possible. We've seen it done, but it's so much better and so much cleaner when you're 40, 45, or even 35 to get that coverage in place because you're solving, think with me, a long term problem. We have to be visionaries and think ahead and plan the wealth transfer way before it's even a problem that exists. So we're solving that problem way ahead of time. And that's what we need to do with our forward thinking business owners and real estate investors. You're already a forward thinker, you're already a visionary. Why not just put it in practice now and fund that liquidity you need at the time you need it most, even if you don't feel like you need it right now? But that's when you need to take care of it.
Uh, there's so many different examples that we could probably pull to illustrate this. And probably, you know, the vast majority of listeners, that people out there, they know somebody that probably has potentially had this problem before, actually, but they just didn't know about it because sometimes it's not public, obviously. Like, people don't want to know that they're going to have to, you know, pay a bunch of taxes to the IRS and stuff like that. So, these are some family internal kind of things that people have to deal with. But one that is very public, and we've talked about this before, is Prince. He is a great example of this exact problem. And so if you're not familiar with what happened with him, just Google it. He passed away, I think it was 57, I believe, but you know, went back and forth like, hey, what's his estate worth? I think they overall, at the end of the day, they had valued it around a little bit over like 150 million. But he had no specific plan in place. He didn't have a will. And that created a massive, a just legal kind of battle between, who owns what, like what's going to be the overall outcome of his estate. And so at the end of the day, they had to sell off a ton of assets to pay the estate tax bill. And that took a long time. It took a lot of money, effort, and just years and time to actually get something settled. And if they would have had something on the front end and been a little bit, wise about this kind of stuff, then it could have solved this problem and they wouldn't have actually had to do all this stuff. But, there's reason that we can learn from other people's mistakes, and especially something like that, because that is a very open and documented example of why this stuff is important. But I would even go far to say, here in Arkansas, like, we have a large farming population in Arkansas. And my wife's side of the family, they are from, Lone Oak, Carlisle, Arkansas. So that's going to be a little bit kind of eastern Arkansas, like past Little Rock Cord where you live at and stuff. But, there's a massive farming community over there. And so these people are very well versed in the life insurance game because they know that they want to keep these farms in the family. These are
Mhm.
multi-generational family farmers. That's what they do. And they are very wealthy. That land is worth a lot of money. And they know in order to keep that, they have to have the liquidity in order to keep the farm in the family. And if somebody doesn't have that in place when somebody passes away, and the family doesn't have liquidity on a taxable estate, what are they going to have to do? They've got to sell it. And the entire farming community knows if someone passes away and they had a large farm and they're selling it, why are they doing that? They have to pay taxes. It's very obvious. And so exactly what you said earlier, what are they going to do? They're not going to go in there and buy it right away. Why would they? Because they're not going to get top dollar for it. They know they've got to sell this farm in 9 months. And so
Mhm.
everybody's going to wait till the very end when they know they have to sell it and there's pressure on the family to pay taxes. And so then they're going to pay they're going to have to sell it at a discount. And so that's what these people do. And whether it's right or wrong, that's just how it is. That's the game, right? And so, it's a very, very real problem that a lot of people have. And there are people that if they're aware of this kind of stuff like farmers are, then they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna be very well versed in these types of strategies because they know they need to keep this farm in the family. And so those are real things that happen, in our neck of the woods. I know it happens in a lot of other farming communities, of course, around America. And it's just, these are real problems that people face. And people that have taxable estates, you've got to make sure that you can protect your family, you can protect your business, you can protect your farm, because the last thing you want to do is to just sell it to have to pay taxes. That's just, it just it just puts a bad taste in your mouth when you have to do something like that. It's just terrible. But yeah, Cord, those are a couple examples that we'll see and we know of. But yeah, we've got to be able to solve these problems for these people that are going to eventually face this in the future.
That problem keeps me up at night. Somebody building great wealth, no plan in place to protect it, and then the family's left having to scramble. I mean, you talk about a legacy wealth transfer, you're leaving a problem for your family, not wealth.
Mm.
That messes me up at night, man. Messes me up when it could have been solved so easily, actually. If you just talk to the right person, you get the right advice you need for someone who actually does this all the time. So your family doesn't have to scramble. So the next time, I'll bring it to a close here. The next time you hear the advice, buy term and invest the rest, I want you to respond with two questions. Number one, whoever is telling you this, ask this question point blank. So, what problem are we trying to solve by employing that strategy? If they're good and they're worth their salt, they will say they're trying to replace the income in your peak earning years. And that is great advice. You should listen to that person and probably buy some term insurance if you don't have any. Kyler and I both have some right now in our season of life because it's necessary. It solves a good problem. But secondly, especially if your estate is starting to grow and maybe you're getting near that taxable threshold, ask a second question. So, in your professional opinion, what asset do you think I need to sell in order to pay the taxes that might come or the fees that might be associated with transferring the wealth in our estate? That is a harder question to answer. And it kind of makes me feel a little uncomfortable to think about because it puts you in that visceral moment that nobody wants to think about. So let us think about it for you. Let us be the solution for that wealth transfer because that's what we do. We live it up, we eat it up, we love it. We are solving that problem for families so they don't have to think about it. And just like you said, Kyle, we're creating that liquidity for the moment that it's actually needed the most. We're solving that problem. And that loving reminder on our part is we're coming alongside our friends in the attorney space or the CPA world, our CFP friends, and then also our clients that might be listening to this. Keep in mind, if there's not a problem there, there's nothing to solve. We're not going to solve a problem that doesn't exist. We're going to come alongside you, create solutions that actually matter, and solve problems that are real, visceral, and actually projected in your estate. Because that's what the real, honest, sincere man of integrity, man of character actually does for their clients. And that's what we hope to do for our people. That's what we hope to do for those that we get the blessing to solve this problem for. So if you want to get that conversation started or you enjoyed today's episode, why don't you shoot a message to the number 49396 and text the word show, SHOW. Text the word show to that number. And if you found any value in today's episode, I tell you what, give us a like and hit that subscribe button. Until next Friday, we will see you again soon.